Is today any assessment? Yes, today is assessment, which will start at 2:45. And I will introduce you to the problem statement. What I am going to give you, the data set and everything will be available on LMS at 2:45 as soon as this, the session gets over. I'll take you through a little bit of what I want, and then you will have to do it being live on this session only and complete it. Okay. Anything related to the last session that we had done? Nothing?
Macro.
No, any questions? I meant any question related to it?
No, Shani.
No, Shani.
No. Okay, let's talk about some frequently asked questions when it comes to recording macro. I think few you must have also asked, and I must have told you that I'll do it later on. First and foremost thing is how to save the codes. I'm going to write the question first, and then I'll go ahead and answer all these questions. And if you want, when I've gone through the entire list, then if you want to add some questions, then you can do that. Can I run the codes macro on other workbooks? Can we give the same shortcut to multiple macros? Macros stored in Excel. How to edit or view or copy my code. How to delete the code. And how to view change the shortcut key. And what is myself stored in? All right, these are the questions that we are going to answer today. How to save the codes? Anybody knows the answer? How are we saving the codes? This I've explained, I think.
It's save button, stop button. No.
Stop button is there. So the code is generated, but how do you save it? Like, how do you ensure that the code is saved?
So we haven't done that.
You haven't done that. So what do we
Yes.
do? We save the workbook itself. Okay, when you save the workbook, the codes gets saved itself. Control S, yes, that would be the thing. So save the workbook to save the code. The codes are not kept anywhere else but in the workbook. But what is the extension that we need in order to save these codes? So just to give you an example, let's say if I...
Macro enabled worksheet.
Yes. So for example, if I have this code and I go to a new workbook, and over here I have put another set of code. Let's say this worksheet, and I put it. Now if I go back and I do a simple save on my workbook where I click on OK and save, and let's say VBA desktop and say OK, now it should give me a warning. Why it would give me a warning? See, when I click on save, it should give me a warning. Okay, except for the fact that I'm using existing name. If I click over here, it's giving me that the following feature cannot be saved in a macro-free workbook. Macro-free workbook means a workbook without any codes in the backend. So if you continue to say yes, then what it does, it wipes off all your codes and only keeps the data in the Excel sheet available. And if you click no, then it takes you back over here where you need to change the extension of your file. So rather than a normal Excel workbook, now you have to save it. Yes, now you have to save it as a Excel enabled workbook. Okay, so every time when you're creating a when you're creating a code or when you're writing the code, you have to save the workbook as macro enabled workbook.
Sorry, Shani, I didn't get what you did tell right now. Could you please repeat it once again?
So basically, how do you save your workbooks? To save the code, you need to save the workbook. How do you save the workbook? The extension has to be macro enabled workbook. So if you save it like a normal Excel file .xlsx, then all the codes in the backend get deleted, erased.
Okay. So the workbook in which we are running any code that should be saved with this extension, not with the normal Excel extension.
Not with the normal extension, correct.
Got it.
Okay. Can I run the macros on other workbooks? What do you think? Like I've recorded in this workbook, and should I be able to run it on other workbooks?
Sorry.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Okay.
Yes.
So we can run the macro
Yes.
as long as the workbook in which it is kept is open. So if this workbook is open, I can run it anywhere. So again, taking an example, let's say I have a new workbook and I have some data that I would like to transpose. Control-Shift-C was my shortcut key. It ran on the new workbook. Even the code is not here. But this only happened because the workbook in which the code is kept, which is this VBA Genpack MIS this is open. If this was closed and I press Control-Shift-C, nothing would have happened. Now, can I give the same shortcut to multiple macros?
No.
No.
Yes.
No, you can't. Okay, so you can't. 1 second.
But Ishani, we can do in other workbook.
No, you can't. See why you can't, why the answer is no is very simple. Because you can run a macro on other workbooks, right? So let's say I saved one macro 1 in book 1, I saved a macro 2 in book 2. And I'm trying to give the same shortcut to both of them. Now, when book 1 is open, can I run it on book 2 or not? I can.
Yes, we can.
I can.
And the macro book 2, can I run on book 1? Yes, I can.
Yes.
Now, if you give the same code to both and you're opening both the workbook, which macro should we run? That will be a point of confusion, right?
Yes.
Hence, it does not even allow you to do it. So if I try to give another macro with the same shortcut, it will tell me that it's taken, use another one. Okay.
It means
Now-
in entire Excel, we need to give the different name for every macro.
Yes, because it's specific to Excel, macros are not specific to workbooks.
Okay.
Shani, I have one question regarding this.
Yes.
So when we are operating another worksheet with the macro enabled file, will the codes automatically copied to that, or
So you're saying if you're creating a copy of the macro enabled workbook?
yeah,
Yeah, codes would be there. Absolutely, yes.
and while running any
It
file?
will run. Yeah, it will run. Absolutely. You're just creating a copy of your existing workbook, right? Like a save as and another name, and you keep it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will. It will have the full functionality.
Thank you.
Okay. Where are the macros stored in Excel? Now, macros are stored in something called a module of a workbook. Now, where is the module of a workbook? Let's see. I'm in Excel right now. I want to go to the backend of Excel. The way to do it, the shortcut key to go from Excel to VB editor is
F11.
Alt F11.
F11.
Right. Alt F11. So if I press Alt F11, I am in the backend. This area is called the VB editor. And over here, I can see all the files. I can see all the sheets. And where is the macro kept? So typically, if you think about this particular worksheet that I was working on, workbook I was working on, finance_data, is there any presence of a module over here? Do you see anything called module?
No.
No. But when you record a macro, automatically module gets inserted in a workbook and the macro is kept inside a module of a workbook. So the recorded macros, where are they kept? They are kept in the module of a workbook. Typically, modules are not there. When you record, they get created and then the codes go there. Right? So they go in the module of a workbook. Now, how to edit or copy or view my code? So either you can go to the view part, go to the macros and go to view macros, and the shortcut key for the view macro is Alt F8. So once I press Alt F8, I can select the macro on which I want to see, and I can click on edit. Once you click on edit, it will take you to your code. So whatever editing, copying, deleting, whatever you want to do, you can do it from here. So how did we go over there? I used Alt and F8 and select macro, click on edit.
Can we copy a code from one sheet, one workbook to another workbook?
Absolutely, copy and paste like I did, right? When I was showing you that you have to have a macro enabled workbook, I simply copied and pasted in another workbook, but the codes are going to be pasted in the VB editor in the backend only.
Okay.
Okay. How to delete the code? The process is the same. Instead of edit, we'll press the delete button.
Delete.
So if I press Alt F8
Delete.
and I get the macro name, there's a button called delete. So if you click on it, it will delete the macro.
Yeah.
And if I want to look at the the shortcut key, let's say I forgot it or I want to change it, then I go to options. So in options, you should be able to see the shortcut key. You can change it, you can review it. So everything remains the same. Only thing is that you have to go to
Change.
options.
Options.
All right, last thing, I don't know how many of you noticed it, but when we record a macro, something like store macro in comes up and it gives us 3 choices. It has something called this workbook, new workbook, and a personal macro workbook. What is the meaning of all these 3?
This means only works this macro, only this workbook, and create a new workbook and
And do what with it? And what does what with it?
The macro will be recorded in the new workbook. Whether
The
we are
macro will be recorded in the new workbook. Okay. So this workbook, new workbook, and personal macro. So 2 things we are doing. What are the 2 things that we are doing? We are recording, right? And then we are storing the code. 2 things, we are recording and we are storing the code. So if I say store macro in this workbook and I was recording in book 1, where do you think we will store the code? In a module of what? Which workbook?
Book 1.
Book 1, because it says store macro in this workbook. So the where is the macro stored? In book 1. Store the code in module of book 1, right?
Yes.
Now, when you are recording and you say store macro in new workbook, what will happen if I'm working in book 1, automatically by default, another workbook opens up and the code that is kept goes to the new workbook. Okay. So where is the code put in the module of new workbook, which opens automatically?
So will that code work in current workbook if we close the new one?
If you close a new one, you've closed the code, right? Amit?
Won't.
Code is open as long as the workbook is open. If you close the workbook, the code is closed. So if I close the new workbook, will the code work?
No.
No, it won't.
No.
Yeah.
So it has to be open. Okay. And in personal, when I'm recording in book 1, where does it go? It goes in VB editor, Visual Basic Editor, which is the backend. And it is independent of any workbook. So it means it is not stored in any workbook. It's stored in Excel itself. Okay. Now, what is the use of all these things? What is the difference between this workbook, new workbook, personal in terms of usage? Like, why should I use which one?
Only confusion is in personal workbook. Other 2 are clear, basically.
So when will you use this workbook and new workbook?
Yes. What about personal?
Which one is preferred? Let's say which one is preferred.
First,
This workbook.
This
Basically, this workbook.
This
This
workbook.
workbook. Okay, and why?
Because we want to run this
Because
code only
is
on this
deep.
specific book only. This
It is
file
deep.
only. Not on other files.
It runs on other files, right? That's what a macro does. That's what the role of a macro is. It runs on all the workbooks. That's what we covered. Frequently asked question, does it run on other workbooks? We said yes, as long as the workbook is kept open. So it does run. Then what is the difference between them? Or which one should I use?
I think personal should be used
New
more often.
workbook, we need to
Personal
open
should be
two
used and
workbooks.
why?
Because when we create something, dashboard and all, we have all the data set, seat named and everything. And there, to avoid any confusion, it should be like person, from my understanding, because
Okay,
it will be
okay.
independent of any other worksheets names and all.
All
We
right.
can access the code from anywhere. If the main workbook is open, we can access that code in any of the new Excel
Correct,
sheet.
correct. Okay,
Then
tell
I
me.
think
Go ahead.
then there is, I think, no use of personal instead of this workbook. They will work at both the same time.
Okay, tell me one thing. How many of you feel that, okay, we are recording a macro and it is getting stored in this workbook? So means whichever workbook you are recording, the code gets stored over
One
there.
second. It may be some kind of privacy policy belongs to the personal. You don't want to show if you are sharing any kind of sheet with anyone and you don't want to show the code to anyone which you are recording.
No, that we can put a password on it. That is not, that is least of the worries. Now
but
tell
if
me one thing. Yes, Ankita.
But if we use personal, then we don't have to worry about whether the workbook is opened or not, where we wrote the code.
Actually, it's a worry point. It is open all the time. I will talk about that. So let me say this thing. So how many of you think that you would be able to remember which macro is in which workbook? How many of you are eating enough almonds to remember that which macro will go in which workbook?
No one unless we are.
No one.
No one.
No one
No
unless we
one.
are computer.
No one, right? So
Right.
do you think storing in this workbook is going to be easy? It's not easy. So when should I use it? It should be used if the macro is used on daily basis. Because if I'm using something on a daily basis, do you think somebody has to remember it for me? Let's say every day I take a dump of the data and clean the data. That's my daily work. The first thing I have to do before analysis, before reporting. So I know where to take a dump, how to take a dump, how to clean the data. Nobody has to teach me. So for such things, we can create it in this macro, this workbook, because I will know exactly which workbook to go, put the dump of the data and clean my data. Agree?
Yes.
Because otherwise it's not possible. Now, what is the beauty of new workbook? The beauty of new workbook is that each macro gets stored in a new workbook. So what we can do, we can name the workbook with the name of a macro. Now, these workbooks do not have any data. They're blank workbooks. All the thing that it consists of is the code. So we can create a folder. Let's say there's a folder called macros. And we can keep all these macro files over there with the name of a macro. So anytime that you need to run a macro and you're trying to remember, okay, which file it was, go to the macro folder, look at the name of the files. That will remind you, open that particular file, run the code and close it. Okay, so this is used, this I would prefer a new workbook any day, and it is used for less frequently, where did I go? Frequently used macros. Is it clear?
Yeah.
All right, and personal, I would say use carefully. Now, why I'm saying use carefully? The problem with macros is when you run a macro, can you use your Control Z? What is Control Z meant for in Excel?
Edit, new
Undo.
worksheet.
Undo, right? Now, when your
cannot use.
codes run, because this coding in the backend is what is created in this application, so it kind of overwrites things. So once you run a code, you can't do anything like undo in the program. You can't undo the work of a program. So is it good or bad?
Bad.
Bad. Your shortcut keys are so simple that you can easily make a mistake in pressing them. And as soon as you press them, since they're always active in a personal macro, they're always active. Why they're always active? Because it's not dependent on any workbook. So whether the XYZ workbook is open or ABC is open, it's still available for you. So if you run your macros and things like if you deleted a row or a column or you deleted a sheet, that is a harmful thing because then your work is all deleted and you can't call it back. So I would say refrain from personal, specifically in macros, which are used for deleting things, formatting and all, we can always revert easily. But personal, in my opinion, we would avoid it. We should avoid it. This workbook works very nicely. And this workbook, if there's something daily, then you do it. Otherwise, put everything in a new workbook. It works very nicely. Is it clear? Any questions?
Got it.
So new workbook macro is kind of a dictionary for us.
It is like a, not a dictionary. It is like a, what do you call it? The back end of the book? Index.
Index.
The
like
index for all your macros.
Okay. So we
So
can
when
say
you want
that all
to
the
use
methods.
any, you go through the file and you said, oh yeah, this was for transpose, you open it and see what happens. If I don't have a file which has data in it, it means I'm not using. The tendency is to close it. So if the workbook is only open for a limited period of time of using a macro, my accidentally hitting the shortcut key and running the macro is minimum.
But if the new workbook in which we are saving the code is open, suppose one or two books are open, then all the macros will be in the running condition.
Active, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
active condition. We are working in another book, and if the by error we press that shortcut key which is we assign for the macro, that will work. So we have to make sure also that all new workbooks should be closed while working on other files.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, Abhishek. The temptation to keep those kind of files open is very less because there's no data with which you're working.
So we won't
in Excel, what happens? You have a data, right? We have you keep on doing analysis because the data is there, or you want to look at a formula because the data is there. But in new workbook, there's no data in the front end.
So there won't be any confusion.
There won't be any confusion. So typically, that is what I feel. The psychology will be, okay, let's open it, let's use it, let's close it because it's an extra file which is open.
Got it.
Okay. All right. Now we move on to the back end. Ready to go in the coding world? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So everyone, I want, you can open a new workbook if you want, and let's go to VB editor, which we can get through Alt and F11. Okay. So when you press Alt F11, you end up in the backend, which is called your VB editor, which is Visual Basic Editor. Okay. Now it may look like this, the way I have that there's some code and there's a, window on the right hand side, or it may look like this, or it may look like this. But in order to say that, Prasad?
Alt F11.
Alt F11, yes. Working? Did you reach here? No. What is coming up? When you press Alt F11, what's going on?
Okay, now I got it. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So in the backend, it may come up like a gray area. And what do we need? We need two important parts in this window in order to work with our codes. One is we go to view, and this is called a project explorer, which is
I'm not
this.
getting that page with F11.
What is
F11.
happening when you're pressing Alt F11? What comes up? Is there anything happening in Alt F11 or no?
No, nothing happened.
I think you need to press
function.
FN, yeah.
Function key.
Try to use with your function key. Now?
Function F11.
Function
Alt F11.
Alt function F11. Got it?
Yes, got it.
Got it. All right. So on the left hand side, what you see is called a project explorer. And in project explorer, what we can see is all the workbooks that are open in front end. So I've got two workbooks open. I've got this finance data and I've got this VBA Genpack MIS, and both of them are visible in the backend. Plus I should be, so every workbook is called a VBA project in the backend. And when I click on the expansion, I will be able to see what are the sheets in the front, how many sheets are there. And if you recorded a macro, you will also have a module to it. Second thing I need is on the right side, I need the code sheet, the sheet where I'm going to write the codes. So where is that? If I click on sheet 1, double click on sheet 1, I will get the code sheet related to sheet 1. If I double click on module, I'm getting code sheet related to module 1. So wherever you want to write the codes. And where can we write the codes? We can write in sheet, we can write in this workbook, we can write in module. So the 3 places where we can write, if you double click on that, that opens the code sheet on the right hand side. Clear? Everybody, do you have the code sheet ready?
So I am not able to see the module sheet.
Ashish, could you repeat, please?
I'm not able to see the module sheet on my Excel file.
Because you might not have recorded any macro in that workbook. You opened a new workbook?
Yes.
Yeah, workbooks typically don't have module till you either insert a module or you recorded a macro.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what we need to do in that case, Shani?
If you don't have a module?
Yeah.
Nothing. Right now, nothing. When the time is right, I'll tell you how to insert a module and why do we write a module.
Okay,
because like I said, there are 3 places to write. Next question, I know sometime it's going to come. What is the difference between writing in sheet versus this workbook or versus module? But we'll have to wait for some time to reach this part.
So we have to open the new worksheet, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Double click on sheet 1, it will open the codes over here. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's take you in the programming world. And what I'm going to do, like I told you previously also, I intend to write notes in this particular module because I want 200% of your attention, not even 100%. I want 200% attention over here. So I write the note so that your focus is only to understand the concept and to ask me enough questions to clear your understanding. Notes and all I'll take care of. So how do you write a code? Because this is a console where you are going to do programming. You write codes. So codes, it's not that whatever you feel like writing, you can write it. There are specific syntax that we need to follow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a single quote, which is used for commenting. Can anybody tell me what is comments on program?
Name of the comment parts can't execute in coding part.
Exactly.
It's only for
exactly. So this is used for, this symbol is used for commenting. And what is it? These are read-only lines of the program. Means they are not executed. Okay. And why do we need comment? Sometimes when you're writing a larger set of code, if you have the habit of writing a small line to explain, okay, what this block of code is going to do, it really comes handy. So if, even if I open my work, which I've done, let's say a few months back, and I try to read the codes which I have written, sometimes even I have difficulty to understand what was this block doing versus what was this block doing. So it's a good habit of writing commenting. And during my master's, we had to create a software in which 3 of us were working on different parts of the code in that software. So since all the 3 had to be integrated together, ultimately, again, commenting. Without commenting, none of us would have understood what the other guy has done. So commenting is really more to understand your program. And I will use to write the codes, notes. So first thing is, what is a program? What is your understanding of a program? What do you mean by the word program? Simple language. You know me now very well. I like to use simple language. So what do you think is a program?
Certain
set of instructions.
Set of instructions.
Yeah.
To execute a task. Okay. Yes. So set of instructions executed sequentially to do a task.
Yeah.
Right? So if I say, can you teach me how to bake a cake? Is that going to be a program?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Right?
Bake a cake. Yeah.
I have to bake a cake. So you will have to tell me, you have to give me a set of instructions. Yes, you will
Yes.
tell me do this first, then do this, and then do this. And can I do it anything in any order, or do I have to follow it in a sequential order in order to bake the cake?
Definitely it has to be in
Well ordered.
sequence.
It has to be in sequence. And anytime I'm missing out on the sequence, I'm not going to get a cake at the end. So anything, any instructions that you pass among yourselves also, let's say if you tell someone, okay, go there at this time, or this is the time I need this report, this is kind of a program only, that you're giving a set of instructions and they have to be executed in sequential order in order to achieve the task. Now, there is one particular thing that was not in Excel and that we are going to use in VBA is called a variable. So any idea what is the use of a variable?
Something changes, I mean.
Something which can be changed.
Changed.
Okay.
Something which a value can be assigned to.
A value can be assigned. So what is a variable? So think about it as an entity to store the value. Now, where did you store the value in Excel?
In cell.
In cells. And why did we store the value in cells? What did we do with it? You refer to it. You created pivots out of it. You used VLOOKUPs on it. You used conditional formatting on it. You referred to the value and did your work. So in programming, since we do not have an application where we have cells, rows, and column, where do we store the value so that we can refer back to them? We store it in a variable. Okay, so what is a variable? Variable is an entity to store a value. Like you said, it can be modified. Absolutely correct. And another thing, it can hold or store only one value at a time. You can't store more than one value in it. So we will be using a lot of variables till a certain point in this entire journey. And after that, you will see that we are not going to use variables so frequently also. But variable is used for what? It is used for storing the value so that you can refer to it in the future. So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay. Now, there are three types of programming, but we call them as procedures in VBA. What are the three types? The first one that we will work with and quite a bit is called a sub, which is called subroutine. It's a short form for subroutine. It has the same definition as a program, meaning it has a set of instructions which have to be followed in a sequential manner in order to achieve a task, right? Same thing, sub. Then we have something called a function. Now, what do you think is the difference between a sub and a function? You have used functions in Excel.
Some can be
I guess predefined codes.
Predefined codes, but subs are also going to be predefined codes, right?
But that is from our end. This is something from Excel itself. Like
so functions in VBA are the functions that we will create. So we can create new functions for Excel through codes. Let's say we don't want a person to go through the torture of learning match. So you inbuilt match and we look up together and create a new function.
Okay.
But what is the characteristic of a function?
Function has arguments.
Function has arguments. Some functions do, some functions don't.
Yes, they return the value. Function returns the value.
Returns a value. That is the key thing. Okay. It returns a value. Subs may or may not return a value, right? Sub is supposed to just perform a task. But functions, that is a key characteristic of a function, that it has to return a value to you. Think about VLOOKUP. You guys have worked with VLOOKUP, right? In VLOOKUP, is there any mathematical calculation going on?
No.
No.
Just looking for a value.
So you are doing a set of instructions, you are picking a value, you're searching for a value, then you're going to a certain column and you're extracting the value. So there is no calculation involved, but with all that set of work that it is doing, it is returning one value out to you. Okay. Now, if you talk about pivot, what is pivot? Sub or a function?
It's sub. It is sub.
It's not a
It is
function.
sub because we cannot change the type of the pivot.
Sometimes it is function. Yeah, when we do average on it.
No. It's
And
not a
function
function.
is amendable. We can
It's a
change that
sub.
function.
It's a sub only, right? It's a sub. Why? It is performing a task for you, and is it returning you one single value?
Yeah, that's understood.
Pivots don't return a value to you, right?
No.
It returns a table to you. Even though
And we
you
cannot,
have put...
we cannot make any change in sub. That's the same type. We cannot make change in pivot types, which are already assigned.
Okay. Not sure if I can. I have to
Like
think about
in
the
function,
statement a little bit more.
Like function, we write the the task in which sequence manner it has to be done. But in sub, we cannot amend those things.
But the subs you are writing, yeah, say anything like is a function or a sub. If you've written a code and you're just running the code, you will not be allowed to change it in any of the things, right? Changing won't be there. But you have to understand, like if I say sorting, sub or a function?
Sub.
Sub. Remove duplicate, sub or a function?
Function.
Sub.
It's a sub. It's again a sub.
It's not
Anything
giving
that
any value.
It is not giving you a single value. You have to focus on the word single value, returns a value. Anything that you're using in your ribbon, Tanu, is always going to be a sub, always. Okay. Functions are the ones we are starting with equal to. Those are the only functions that you aren't knowing
Got
in
it.
Excel. Right? And what about the macro recording that you do? Sub or a function?
It is sub.
Function.
This is again a sub, right? Why? Because you said, okay, record, I did 10 things. Now you repeat. So it is repeating all those 10 things which requires transposing it, one of the examples, but it's again not ending up in one single value for you. And the last part.
So in short, which whatever returning a single value, that is function only.
Correct. Anything which returns a single value to you is a function. Rest everything is a sub.
Can you please give an example of function?
All these VLOOKUPs that you use, match you used, all these are functions.
All right.
Right?
Okay, got it.
Yes, Tarun, you had a question?
No, my question was the same.
Okay. Kshitij, is it clear what a sub is?
Kind of.
Can you please explain one more time?
Yeah, kind of a little.
I'm a bit confused.
Sub is basically, think about it. If, okay, you all understand VLOOKUP, right? So let's take VLOOKUP as an example. In VLOOKUP, if I was returning a table, I know I can't, but if my VLOOKUP returned a table, is it a sub or a function?
Sub.
It's a sub. Why it's a sub? Because it's returning more than one value out to you. Okay. And when it returns you that unique value, one value, then it is a function. It's going to be treated as a function. So if I have to understand in Excel, anything that you are doing, whether it is conditional formatting or it is like filtering or sorting or text to column, all these are subs. All these are subs because they are performing a task, and it's not that they're going to end up in one single value. It may or may not be. Okay. But when you use these functions, the starting with equal to, irrespective of which function you use, it can only return you one single value in a cell. It cannot return you more than one.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now comes another one. I know it's 2:45. Eklavya, allow me 2-3 more minutes. Otherwise, the topic remains in between. So what is an event? Event is same as sub. However, we cannot run a sub. Oh, we can't run an event. It runs based when triggered by our actions in Excel. Now, what does this mean? Any program that you write, you have to run it. Yes or no?
Yes, right.
And you define when you want to run it. Correct?
Yes.
But in Excel or in Microsoft Office, we have programs that run by themselves because we did some action which triggered them in the backend. to give you a simple example of event, let's say I have this worksheet, sheet 2. I don't want it, I want to delete it. So all I did was right click and delete. This window pops up. This is called a message box. Okay. Did you, obviously this message box came because of some coding, right?
Yes.
Everything that you see in a software is because of the code in the backend. So a code got triggered, but did you run it? Did you guys run this code?
No.
No.
What did you do? You were just
For
saying
action.
you were doing a task in Excel. That was, I said, okay, I want to write delete and click on delete, which triggered a code in the backend, and now it is running.
Yeah.
Okay. So these kind of things are called events.
All right.
And where you run a code, that is a sub.
That's an involuntary, actually.
Yes. So another thing to understand, you guys know of motion sensing lights,
Yeah.
right? So motion sensing lights, what happened? Let's say there's a room, you walk into the room. If there are motion sensing lights, the light turns on automatically. And when you leave the room, the light turns off automatically, right? Now the process is what? The process is the light turns on and turns off. Now I can do that in two ways. One way is I go to the switch, turn it on. And whenever I want to turn it off, I put down the switch. So what is this? Sub or an event?
This is
Event.
sub.
This is sub. This is sub because you are dictating when it will turn on and off, right? And the portion where I'm talking about the motion sensing light, I enter the room, the light turned on. What is that? Sub or an event?
It's
That's
an
an event. Process is the same, that the light turned on. But one is I triggered through my action, and one is I decided, okay, I want to turn it on. So that's the main difference between sub and event.
Got it.
Clear to everyone?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Who said no? Tarun?
Yeah.
Okay. Tarun, to give you an example, one second. One example I've shown you how in Excel that is happening. Let me show you an example on data now.
My point is, in both of the cases, we triggered.
No,
One
we
is
didn't trigger,
manually.
triggering
manually.
means, manually when you do manually, it's not triggered.
Okay.
Okay, another simple example to understand. Let's say I have a habit of eating food every day at 2 o'clock. Okay, every day I'm going and eating food. That's a sub. I'm doing a process. I decided my schedule that every day 2 o'clock I want to eat. And let's say at 1:30 I'm feeling very hungry. So that triggered my intention to eat the food. That becomes an event.
Fine.
Right? And if you want to see on a data, filtering is what? Is a sub. You go and you give the values. Now, if I created a sheet like this, what I'm doing filtering only, but I've put an event inside it, on top of it. And as soon as I'm changing the values, the filtering is happening. So this has become an event. Tarun, is it clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. All right. Okay, now that's it for today. Still need to understand how will I make up for 15-20 minutes lost. So this I'll upload. Now let's talk about your assignment, assessment. Okay, everybody, can you go to your LMS and go to this weekly assessment portion and look for assessment 2. Let me know when you guys are ready. I'll explain it and then I'll tell you to work on it.
Ishani, there is only assessment 1 is coming on weekly assessment.
Now, just refresh it because I did not publish. Now I published it.
Just a minute,
Just refresh.